So I'm going to be moving the camera here shortly. Just a quick explainer of what I'm doing. I'm going to be working on a flute for my buddy, the Ghost of Garduna. You can find him on YouTube. His music is interesting, not really my usual flavor, but I do love his song Zombie Queen. Um, so he being a musician and me being a woodworker, and me wanting to make a gift for him because he's been my friend for a while and I like to make gifts for my friends. What's the point of having these skills if I don't? So I've got a piece of juniper which is relatively straight, and I will be throwing, making a mess with that to start. All I'm doing this stream is a bit of sawing, which will be hand sawing, so I don't think there'll be an audio warning. But I'll do a quick bit of on-screen sawing, and then I will be debarking the piece, and that'll be it for this stream. Okay, so let's get started. First things first, get the camera angle right. Up it comes. There we go. And there's the piece of wood I'll be working on. I've already got one viewer. Hello. See live chat, nothing yet. Okay. First things first, I'll need some light. And next thing, I will need my apron. And of course you'll notice that I am wearing shorts tonight because normally I do work with shorts on. Because I'm a big guy and because generally my legs aren't in any danger, I tend to wear shorts to work because I like the cool factor. Keeps me from overheating. One other thing I will need is a pair of gloves, which I have handy, and some form of blade, which I think I will use this one. Though I may have to sharpen that. Definitely needs to be cleaned. That's the one I've been using to do these. And actually, before I get started at that, I'm actually going to move the table out and clamp down a towel. Mostly because I just need something to act as a catch cloth for the mess I'm about to make. So this, for now, will sit down there. And we'll get my mess cloth sorted out. The major reason I'm using a mess cloth is because with this wood, well, let me bring my face back. It's still pretty sappy, so anything that I cut off of it is going to be sticky. And the last thing I need is a sticky surface when I'm trying to do something else on this table, on this bench rather. Now, where have I poked those clamps? They should be over here, I believe. No. Oh, they're there. They're up here. Okay. And that one will be the first one. Just trying to get the... Okay, I'm going to open that clamp a little ways further. This is clumsy with my gloves on. So, and if you're wondering why I'm wearing gloves now when I'm normally doing work with wood, it's because this is, as I said, sticky and tends to be messy. Okay. Let's see where a good spot is to hang that. Can we get it to come this far? Yes, okay. Can we get the clamp around that side? I cannot. Okay, so we will change that plan. just on the off chance there's anyone watching, this may get a little squeaky. So. Okay, it didn't. That's good news. Now, that still may not work because that may still be too thick here. But we'll see. No, that works. Okay. Fortunately, these are fairly shallow clamps, so as awkward as this is, it won't be too bad to get done. There we are. Okay. Move that out a little more and plant the other side. Okay. I'm just going to do the reach over thing. Of course, the edge of the towel is getting in the way. Or is that the clamp not quite fitting? Right. Oh no, there's a piece of wood in the way there. Okay. Well, then we'll take a bit of slack there and do this. There we are. Okay. And one last clamp to add. Get a little tension on it. Yes, this is just as awkward as it looks. There. And that'll do. Okay. There. I don't even want to handle that barehanded because it is very sappy wood. And no one watching again now, that's fine. Check for live chats just on the off chance. None. Okay. Anyone who happens to be watching this in the future, I do appreciate you very much. Let's see here. Okay, so it looks like right about here. You can see where the bend is here on this angle. So I'll be cutting this part off. It'll be easier to cut it over on that side. Unfortunately, I've got a clamp in the way now. Improvise. Let's see. I think we'll just skip the improvisation and go straight to the hand-to-hand. So I need to cut it. Now I have to ask myself, oh, let me just change angle here. Now I have to ask myself if I want to keep this end for a mouthpiece up here. And I don't think I really do. What I can do is cut just beyond that angle, and then if I decide to put a mouthpiece on, I can actually cut this off, or shave this part down, and form a mouthpiece out of that. So I will mark my cut on the... Oh, actually, another thing that I should do is determine how much drilling depth I actually have available before I start cutting, I mean. So the longest bits I have are these guys. And what I'll do, I'll mark from about here because I had to cut this end off anyway. And yes, while this knife is not particularly sharp, this wood is very, very hard. So I've got a decent mark made there. And we will mark from about where the drill starts which is there. We'll go just past the point and then mark again. And that's about there. Okay, so it's going to be a bit of a shorter flute than I intended, so that angle no longer really enters into my calculations here. Unfortunately, like I say, this is the longest set of drill bits that I have, so it does limit my ability to cut a particularly deep hole, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, considering the flute I'm going to be making is going to be more on the side of a recorder. That's actually a fairly good length. So now I need a saw. Oh, I've gone and left the angle bad again. Well, not really, but I should be able to move my camera around a little bit. Hopefully I don't knock anything flying doing this. Move the garbage over. And let's see if we can get you a better angle here. There we are. And my trusty hacksaw, because as I said, this stuff is pretty thick, or pretty dense rather. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to knock off some of these nubs, these little branches. They need to go, so I need to figure out exactly where I'm cutting from, which is there. Okay. And bring this back over here. There we are. I'm cutting from here down. So let's get a working mark. And oh, not too bad for dead on the mark here. There we are. Now, real quick, strip these bits off. And actually, it occurs to me that it would be far easier to debark this thing while I've still got the whole piece together. So rather than sawing the other end, I will take this end off first. You guys can't see that. So again, we move our camera. There we are. And I'm only taking off about 3/4 of an inch or so. Okay, this is going to require an audio warning because this is going to get squeaky. As I said, this is a very, very dense wood. That braced there. There we Now, I'm relatively sure some of the people watching this at some point, whether it's now or in the future, are going to be wondering why I'm using a handsaw. And give me just a second to finish this cut and I'll explain. Oh, damn, that's hard. Okay. There we are. If you're wondering why I use a hacksaw and not, say, my miter saw behind me, I can show you very easily once I retrieve this piece. Come here. Okay. That one's not so bad. There we are. Okay, if you look right here, just at this edge, you can see there's a very white spot here. That's actually the paint from my hacksaw blade. I have never in my life worked with wood that is that hard to cut. I see I've got a viewer. Anything in live chat? Of course it doesn't work properly when I want it to. Top chat. Nothing in live chat. Live chat. Nothing in live chat. Okay. Hello, whoever you mystery person is. So, as I was saying, I've never worked with a wood this hard. And considering that juniper is supposed to be a softwood, cutting this should not have me sweating. At all. This is surprisingly dense wood, and I've explained it before, but I don't mind repeating myself. The reason I think that this is so... Hi, I've got 2 viewers. Thanks for coming by, guys. So I think the reason that this is so dense is because the tree it was cut from is very close to the salt water. And I think over the years, it's gotten... Well, almost certainly it's gotten soaked directly by salt spray. It carries on the wind when we get a high enough wind. And more likely than not, that explains why this is so very hard for juniper. That might actually make a half-decent candle holder. We'll keep that guy. Now, the next step I've got, and I'll bring you guys back over here so you can see what I'm doing, is to take all the bark off of this from here all the way down. And that's going to be a bit of a bitch. Actually, not so bad today. And you'll notice when I hit pale spots like this, I tend to try to avoid that area. That isn't necessarily the wood, but it is usually the, you could call it the water sheath. I believe, if I recall correctly, it's actually the phloem in a tree. That's the section of the bark that carries water from the roots to the branches. Essentially, it forms the circulatory system of the tree. And that's why it's generally a bad idea to do things like carving your initials in a tree. While it is a nice romantic gesture, it's actually creating a scar on the tree. And I think personally it ends up looking, well, I've seen places where it's been done decades earlier, and even decades later, those scars don't necessarily heal. For the record, if you guys are in chat and want to say anything or ask me any questions, feel free. Every now and again, I'll take a short break and have a look at the chat. But first, I'm going to get about half of the bark off of this before I take my next stop. And I don't know if you can see it on camera. I'll bring it over a bit. Let's see. This spot right here. Okay. I'll bring this up so you can see it. You see that slightly shiny spot? That's sap. And that's very dry and very hard. It's essentially a resin that the tree produces. And one of the mistakes I made with this stuff when I acquired it, when I harvested it, was that I didn't strip the bark off right away. Now, part of the reason I didn't is not visible on that piece. Let's have a look at the other one. Here we go. You can see, let me see here. There we go. You can see right here where the wood has started to separate slightly. That's what's called checking. And if I had taken the bark off too soon, as opposed to too late like now, if I had taken the bark off of this too soon, what would have happened was those checks, because they're produced by the wood losing moisture, had I stripped all the bark off, it would have lost moisture from the entire surface as opposed to just the end grain first. You would end up with a potentially very long check, which could run down to here. I've even seen pieces that, when I strip them too soon, even this length can check the entire length, and that can ruin any chance to make a good piece with it. Now, my focus right now is not to completely get through the outside bark layer, but to take off the really rough stuff that's got the sap in it. And then I'll probably give it, I may give it a whole other day to lose whatever moisture it wants to, just to make sure that the process is slow. Ideally with woods that are less dense than this. So if I was working with, say, birch or spruce, what I would be doing would be stripping off the entirety of the outer bark and then letting it rest for a few weeks. But at this point, that's not really feasible. So I'm going to be stripping this completely. It's fairly humid here anyway, so I don't think the wood is going to lose too much moisture. It's been raining quite a lot the last couple of days, and quite a lot again today. And I think the atmospheric moisture will slow down the process of the wood losing, or the atmospheric humidity rather, will slow down the process of the wood losing moisture enough that, there we are, stripping down to the phloem there now. Anyway, as I was saying, I think the atmospheric humidity will slow down the process of moisture loss enough that this won't check. If it does, hopefully it'll only check partway in. That's where you have a crack that comes from the outside edge in towards the heartwood. If you don't know what heartwood is, the lighter color out here is sapwood, and this on the inside, the darker color, which is generally how most trees look. This will be the heartwood. Now, this is usually far harder than this, so hopefully it'll make a good musical instrument. And this is the second time I've tried this. The first time I used a much smaller piece and thinned it down very much on the outside, and didn't have a very wide, very large circumference of hole of tube drilled through the middle of it, and I think that actually impaired the performance of it. I was able to get a kind of a whistly tone towards the end, but it wasn't great. Now, okay, I'm just going to strip a little more of this off, and then I'm going to check chaps. Now, if you're wondering how I'm stripping this without dulling my blade, I don't know. But it's a technique I've been using for decades, and it's served me well so far, so I'm not terribly worried about it. Now, let's see if there's any chats here. Oh, it looks like I've loosened up my stand a bit too much. Just one moment. No, not that one. Must be, there it is. That lug needed to be tightened. There we are. Okay. Top chat and live chat. No messages. Okay. Are you guys content to watch? That's fine. Let me move that down again. There we go. I'll go back to work. And as you can see from the sweat on my brow and the tension in my arm, this is actually something of a workout. It's definitely work. And being that I don't particularly like the idea of being a gym rat, this is the ideal workout for me because I'm actually doing something that I consider productive. Now, get over here. And you'll notice under some of these spots it's very pink. That's generally where the newest branches were getting ready to form, or had been forming. Or in some cases, you'll get bark scale forming. For instance, this here is a bark scale. I can get the knife under there and just pry that up. You'll see it's very pink underneath, almost like new skin. This is basically exactly what this is new skin on the tree. And this may be indicative of some illness the tree had. I doubt it, but yeah, sometimes you can just peel them right off. And you can see it's almost, how to describe it, almost the same color as flesh in some ways. Like that's a very meaty pink there. And essentially this is what happens when the tree forms new skin, or when there's when this particular species forms new skin. So if there was some sort of damage. Now, this was a tree that was near a ball field, so it is quite possible softballs and baseballs were bounced off this tree, and that may be what's causing these. Essentially similar to a bruise. But to be honest, that's just theorizing on my part, so I don't know 100% for sure. And I'm being careful now because I'm noticing that I'm getting into the phloem rather quickly, and I don't want to cut that out too fast. As I said, the focus tonight is simply to get the bare wood showing. And I don't know, I doubt you can, but I will come and show you this as well now. All of this, here we are, all this spots, they're not freckles, they're essentially sap spots. So it's almost like the tree had acne, I guess, in a sense. This is a sort of excess deposit of fluid in the in between the layers of skin on the tree. And yeah, acne is not really a great analogy for what this is, but it's the closest I can come up with at the moment. And again, if you guys have any sort of question or anything for me, or any comment you'd like to make, feel free. Again, I'll take a break in a little while and have a look for chats. Now, one of the rules with using a knife is to never cut towards yourself. With the strokes I'm making, they're very short, they're very firm, and even if I were to miss, and I did just strike myself pretty hard, that knife unintentionally, but you can see that the knife is not going through the glove. That's the major reason I'm wearing gloves for this, because this is sticky, and if it suddenly slipped in a cut, then I would actually have quite a level of protection. To be honest, I wouldn't mind doing this barehanded if this wasn't as sticky. Uh, but that's partly because my skin is fairly calloused. So, yeah. Okay. I'm just going to clean up to that line. Maybe a little touch beyond. And then I can start actually scraping as opposed to cutting. So I think I'm up above that line now. So this spot here will serve as my mark. And I'll go no further than that where I can help it. So we'll try and get a little bit of wood showing all the way around, so I know where to stop. I'm actually sweating more than I expected to, so I'm actually going to grab one of my very hetero, very sexy bandanas. Whew. And yes, because I'm a big guy and I sweat a fair amount, I do have water nearby. So if you happen to be listening, either now or in the future, I would appreciate a like, a share, a comment, and a subscribe if you're willing. There is a donation link, or at least there will be when I post this in its final form. I have a bad habit of forgetting that I have the donation link. You can PayPal me at ardentparty@gmail.com if you want. But as I said, I do tend to forget that I have those links, so I tend to end up doing the stream before I realize, oh crap, I could have put that in the description in the first place. Now, before I put my glove back on, I'll check one more time for chats. And I've got nothing. Okay. That's already half an hour. Good gods. I didn't expect it to take this long, to be honest. But then again, I've known for a while that this wood is a little more difficult to work than I expected it to be. As I said, juniper is supposed to be a softwood, but it's quite a bit sturdier than I'm used to, and certainly stronger than I expected. I don't know if you guys remember the juniper cane, I suppose we could call it, though I don't think it would actually hold my weight very well for any length of time, that I have sitting on the rack behind me there. But the amount of flex in that is surprisingly great. I do believe I'm going to end up with a blister on my thumb out of this, so I'm going to be a little rougher than I mean to. There we go. Now, with this done, I should be able to get down under this outer bark layer fairly quickly. Okay. Okay, that not working. I'm going to switch to a scraping instead. And that should allow me to get more of this stuff up fairly quick. There we go. And what's actually going on? Oops, a little too deep on that angle. Okay. The principle I'm using when I scrape with the blade perpendicular to the wood is essentially the same thing that a cabinet scraper does. It's just pulling a tiny portion of the surface up along it and essentially shaving it. Oops, just a second, I'll get you another one. There we are. So it's basically just, can you even see that? There you go. It's basically just shaving the surface. Well, you can see now that I'm taking shavings like this is going. Okay. Well, again, as I've said, this is surprisingly hard for juniper. And the angle that the blade sits at is a little difficult to control when it's down like that. And part of the noise that comes from that is just the bounce that the blade has because it's gripping into the wood a little more than I expected it to. There is a better tool for this than a straight knife. It's called a draw knife. Unfortunately, I don't have one. That will be probably the next purchase, just in time for it not to be important, because I won't need it for this particular task. But the more support I get, of course, the more tools I can buy, and that means the more complicated projects I can make, and the more ambitious I can be about things. And right at this point, the plan is any proceeds from doing this are going to be split roughly. Well, let's say I got $100 for one of my projects. Out of that $100, 10 would go into my savings. 20 would probably go to getting me some little treat as a present for accomplishing something. I think it's very important to reward yourself for accomplishments. So we're up to 30 there. 50 would go towards more tools for out here. Tools are expensive. And 20 would go towards software or equipment for the studio / setup out here and in the house. Either software for the computer, various things. Hello, Billy Blogs. Thank God it isn't a skin flute. No, I'm skinning a flute right now. Let's see. Since I've got chats, I'll take a moment and respond to them. Do you like my sexy ever so straight headband? Or headwear, I should say. Let's see. That's a blowpipe, don't lie. No, a blowpipe would be significantly longer. What are the temperatures like there in summer and winter? Usually, our temperatures in the summer peak out under 30. Now, with the humidity added, that can get up as high as 35, sometimes even to 40. But usually that's 2 or 3 days, maybe a week of that much heat. And then usually it's immediately followed by, don't know if you can see the view out the window, but it's very rainy out today. Usually that's followed then by a period of extended rain, because it gets very humid and the clouds get extremely pregnant. In fact, to the point that this morning at 8 o'clock, uh, the sun came up, it got lighter, and then at 8 o'clock it got darker because it started to rain most of the day. It's very humid right now, um, which explains why I'm sweating like a pig in church. Um, very much like parts of the UK, we're on about the same latitude. Uh, in fact, friends of mine in university years ago were from London and Scotland and complained uh, pretty much incessantly about all the fog and rain we get here. At which point I pointed out to them, aren't your countries known for their fog and rain? And they did actually do a statistical analysis, and yeah, St. John's isn't called Fog City for nothing. It is the single foggiest city on the planet. In the winter, it's pretty much the same. We don't get down below 30 very much, even with the wind chill, which is nice. I lived in southern Alberta for a while, where sometimes it gets to minus 60 on the Baldash Prairie. That's with the wind chill, and that's not comfortable. Um, how did one of my friends describe it? The uh, the eastern wind sweeps across the Baldash Prairie and strips every bit of moisture out of your body on its way by. Yeah, it's uh, it's a very wet climate, which is good in some ways and bad in others. But then again, any climate has its ups and downs. Personally, if I'm going to spend a lot of time in a very wet climate, I'd rather it was warm. So I'm thinking coastal Texas will be nice if I can ever manage to get there. Assuming my government ever decides to actually let me leave. And you'll notice it's much easier to strip this now that I've gotten down through some of the really thick, sappy bark. Like this stuff that's curling up here. It smells amazing, don't get me wrong. And this is basically how cinnamon is harvested. It's basically just shavings of tree bark, which is kind of surprising to a lot of people because they tend to think that cinnamon is some sort of plant that grows by itself, and it's actually not. It's actually the bark from a tree. A tree that is rarely, if ever, harvested for its wood, but which I've heard that the wood of it is actually incredibly aromatic, which I would imagine is not hard to believe. Let's see here. Oh, there we are. Are you going to integrate assimilate when you go to Texas? Oh, absolutely. Am I allowed to hunt? Ish. I have some personal barriers that make it difficult for me to go hunting. Between my very bad knee and some, we'll call them legal entanglements, at the moment, hunting is not really something I'm all that focused on anyway, because I'm really focused on this. Plus, it is incredibly difficult to get a hunting license here. The competition is extremely fierce, and generally newcomers are looking at 5 to 10 years before they can get a moose license. I imagine I could probably get a rabbit license fairly easily. I could go bow hunting pretty much any time if I recall the regulations correctly. Plus, right now with Trudeau's banning of God knows how many guns, it really isn't worth my time to look at hunting or regular type fishing with a rod and reel. Let me see. I think I saw another. Oh, there we are. Have I ever tried smoking cinnamon like an idiot? No, you'd have to be an idiot. I don't know for certain that I need a license for hair specifically. I do know you need a license to fish. And Newfoundland is a fishing economy, so that's understandable. But when it comes to fishing things like, oh, excuse me, salmon or trout, well, trout is a different story, but salmon especially is highly restricted. We only have one or two really good salmon rivers here, and they've been fished out pretty hard. Plus, you had to realize that lakes or sea fishing, um, you can do both. Though we don't have a lot of big lakes that are easily accessible. Um, if you're interested, look up Lake Jeddore, Jeddore. That's in the interior of the province. And pretty much the only way to get there is cross country hiking ish, or by helicopter, which I think there's um, a fishing lodge on Jeddore Lake. I'm not 100% sure. That's the back of the blade, by the way, folks. Don't freak out. I'm just sweating an awful lot and it's making me itch. Um, hopefully that doesn't end up being the thumbnail for this one. I'm starting to see Disco's point about thumbnails. I really should take control of that. As far as, like, I grew up fishing, or in a fishing family, I should say, which means really I was involved with the fishery. But that's the commercial side of it. That was, at the time I was a kid, that was cod, lobster, what else? Well, cod and lobster were the two big ones when I was growing up. Now it tends to be, uh, cod is still one of the most, oh, what have we got here? Disco bully, yeah, Disco does bully me to make better thumbnails, which is fair. She's got a point. Just don't tell her I said that. And I have actually been trying to get a handle on the program she suggested to me. But, I mean, as I said repeatedly, I'm a woodworker, not tech support. So, while it may seem like something very simple to Disco, it's, at the moment, beyond me because I haven't had my lightning bolt moment, my light bulb moment with that particular program. So, once I do, and I figure out one basic mechanic, I will probably have a fairly easy time with the rest of it. But it's getting those basic mechanics that's actually killing me right now. I'm very tempted to simply make a thumbnail in Paint and see if I can't use that for a template somehow. And I will give Bezic some credit. He did suggest to me today that I should use a watermark in the corner of my video, which should be there. Should be in that corner right now. Let me know if you don't see it. I don't see it on my screen, so I imagine it'll be there. I know it's there on some of the other live streams I've done, so I don't know if maybe it has to be added in post by YouTube or what. Okay, that's really getting bare at this point. Something I always wondered. Didn't go in. I know. How do I miss a target that size? Wow, that's really sweet. They used to make a drink years ago called juniper beer. I bet that was really good. It's actually a really interesting taste. It's definitely not poisonous from the taste of it. Live chat again. Oh, of course. And of course my thumb is not... Okay, what is that tree? This is juniper. Juniper. Secret is safe with me. That is a cinnamon tree. No, this isn't a cinnamon tree. Only joking, you will just get pervs clicking on it. Wait, no. Smoking cinnamon. No, never tried that. I've taken stick cinnamon, broken it, and stuck pieces in my cheek for breath freshening. This particular tree, like I was saying, is juniper. This is... I don't think it's a species necessarily native to Newfoundland. I know it's North American. But this particular tree is a lot harder than I would normally expect juniper to be. If I recall correctly, juniper is classified as a hard softwood. But this is working, like working at this is vaguely reminiscent of working with oak. It's that level of hardness. Fortunately, it's not turning any of my organs or orifices purple. Oak will do that. There's a chemical in oak that will actually turn your skin purple. And I guess the paler you are, the more purple it turns, because being ginger, I required very little exposure to oak, freshly cut oak wood, to gain that purple coloration on my fingertips, which is quite funny the first time you see it, because you have no idea where it came from. And can be a little disturbing. What am I up to? 51 minutes. Goodness. And I've got some new chats. Oh, of course, I can't get the button to work properly. Live chat. There we are. Yeah, okay. So the last thing I've got is just the question about what the tree is. Yeah, juniper. This is locally grown. Not by which I don't mean it's actually industrially grown commercially or anything like that. This is just a piece that I harvested a little over 2 years ago now, if I recall correctly. Or closing on 2 years. And I made a mistake of storing it for too long without stripping the bark off. What I probably would have been best off doing would have been waiting a week or two, then stripping the bark and leaving the bare wood to sit until I needed it. Unfortunately, I didn't do that, so now I'm forced to do this. Okay. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing this. I'm going to try and power through this a little quick here now, because I don't really want to go much past an hour. I finally caved in and started watching the Terminal List today. I shouldn't say caved in. I should say finally gave up, not so much resisting it, as just decided that I needed to watch some TV. Juniper is traditionally used in Scottish folklore. Oh, hang on. I saw something about polytheism there. Let's see here. Juniper is traditionally used. Come on, there we go. Gin. Yeah, juniper is used for gin. Actually, I think it's juniper buds, and I actually do not mind the taste of gin. Juniper is traditionally used in Scottish folklore, Gaelic, polytheist seining rites. Is that supposed to be Samhain? Samhain? No, okay, it's not. Seining. I'm not familiar with that term. Such as those performed at Hogmanay, yeah. Smoke of burning juniper, accompanied by traditional prayers and other customary rites, is used to cleanse, bless, and protect the household and its inhabitants. So that's not unlike the native peoples out west who use sage to smudge. Some indigenous peoples of the Americas use juniper in traditional medicine. For instance, the Dene Navajo use it for diabetes. Huh. Yeah, juniper is used in gin. Sorry, I had that wrong. So it isn't. It obviously is not endemic to North America. It may be a different species of juniper in Europe that they use, or in England. And I should have remembered that, considering I do like the occasional bit of gin. Anyway, I am going to power through this as fast as I can, and then I'll come back and take a few chats while I'm having my smoke at the end. Something there, because this stuff is so very, very sappy. The last thing I need is to get it on my clothes. So, I don't necessarily mind it on the flesh of my arms, but I'd rather not have to try and get it out of clothing. Okay, that's the end of the roughest wood. So now I should be able to do this all straight. Oh, you guys can't even see what I'm doing here. Sorry. There we go. You can see there's a good reason I put down this cloth. Oh, and something did just occur to me. Someone was asking a while ago, and I don't know if it was you, Billy, or if it might have been someone else in my chat, but you were inquiring about the meaning of the phrase anti-white and white positivity. The best book I can recommend would be by Jason Kuna, Kohne, and it's called, if I recall correctly, Going Free. And it's subtitled A Guide to Aligning with the Ideals of Western Kind, or something along that line. I've read about half of that book. Jason is, I believe, significantly younger than me, or potentially around my age, and because of that, a lot of what he talks about doesn't really apply for me, because I lived through that transitional phase from when we basically had a truly racially blind society in North America to what we have now, which is essentially the left wanting to return to a segregation and racially prejudicial system. And having watched that over the last few years, it's kind of disheartening, and it's very obvious if you've been watching commercials. in North America and Britain especially the last little while, that anywhere that leftist ideas are being um, put forward, that there is a distinct push to erase white people. Now, I do talk about ginger erasure a fair bit. Generally, I make jokes about it because of things like ginger supremacy, things like that. Which reminds me, I've actually come up with a new sexuality, ginger queer. That's for people who either identify as or are attracted to people with ginger features. I will be putting that on a t-shirt at some point soon. And probably a mug as well. Right now, I'm looking for a new merch company because I was not happy with the quality of the printing from my last one. And to be honest, I'm not 100% sure the account that I had with my last merchant still exists. So I won't even recommend you go and check it out. But for me, the two items I generally order the most online are hoodies and mugs. I collect mugs, and hoodies are just, it's a modern cloak as far as I'm concerned. They're just one of the most utilitarian items that humans have in their clothing, or in their wardrobes rather. And bad reputation be damned, I'll wear what I want. And that's unfortunately deeper than I wanted it to be. Oh, you guys still can't see what I'm doing because I'm an idiot with camera angles. Over here. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about that particular message, the white well-being stuff, definitely check out Jason's book. He also has a stream on YouTube under the channel name No White Guilt. And if you do go over there, please be kind enough to let him know that Ardent sent you. As I say, a lot of the principles he talks about in his book, they don't really apply for me in my particular case, because having been raised through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, I'm essentially inoculated against all these various meme pathogens, like the idea that white people are somehow responsible for slavery and things like that, when the actual truth of the matter is it was white people who ended the slave trade, or at least put as much of a stop to it as we could, which certainly was within our own societies. And I think it's definitely an affront to the legacy of that action, that the same people who would have been, or would potentially have been enslaved had we not done that, are now the ones demanding that we pay some kind of reparations. Especially considering every society on the planet has, or every culture on the planet rather, has a history of slavery in one form or another. I mean, I'm essentially English descent, and my people may have kept slaves. No one in my family did, I'm sure. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a poor. But, and I do see you chatting there. I'll get to you in just a minute. But the idea that black people born 200 years after the end of slavery somehow deserve reparations for something they never experienced, or hasn't been experienced by their family at all, potentially, is definitely offensive. When, if the sins of the ancestor are carried to the current generation, then the Italians owe the English a lot of money, considering they basically enslaved the entire country at one point. Not to mention the poor bastards in the Slavic countries, who actually are the eponymous reason for the word slave. Okay, getting there. Where's my cloth? The other reason I'm putting a cloth around this is because I am drenched in sweat and I don't wish to make this wood any more moist than it already is. And you can make of that particular comment what you will. Okay, I should be about 10 minutes or so and I'll be completely done this. Maybe less so I put a little more force on this. I'm trying not to tear up too much of this wood because every stroke of this leaves a tool mark. And a tool mark has to be removed for a piece to be finished. Unless you're doing something artistic. Like, for example, the candle holder that I've got for sale on my Getter account right now. Which you guys would have watched me make. Or at least would have watched me make part of the anyway, yeah, as I say, that's for sale on my Getter. And I've completely lost my train of thought again. Nothing new. But, okay, now that I've got this notch down here cut, this should be a lot easier. Because now it's really just a matter of rotating the wood and scraping. Oh, I was talking about tool marks. On the candle holder, I did intentionally leave tool marks to make it look quote-unquote rustic, and I think the aesthetic effect of that was actually quite pleasing. So I don't know that I'll ever necessarily do it again, but it's nice to have actually done it at least once. I think I can dispense with you now. Get off. There we go. And you can see what I'm doing again. There. And you can see I'm choking up pretty light on the blade here. Surprisingly, as hard as this wood is, this extremely cheap Chinesium blade is actually holding up pretty well. And retaining an edge surprisingly well. Okay. Oh, now I'm getting into the wood too much. Okay. This should be a little easier this way. I will give you guys a bit of an audio warning. This may squeak from time to time because I'm working in such a tight area. And the reason for the squeaking is because the wood gets the friction in two different directions will basically lift a tiny section of the wood like this stuff here, and moving back and forth and putting force down causes that to rub hard against itself. And that's why you're not getting any squeaking when I go in one direction or take a longer stroke. Okay, just going to chip off the last ends of this just to expose the bare wood at the very end. As you can see, this is actually really, really hard. Okay, that edge is definitely suffering now. I'll take smaller cuts. And once I have this end chipped off, I should be able to scrape that in fairly short order and then be done for the night. Not counting cleaning up, of course. In case you're wondering what happened to the small flute that I was working on, which I only showed a couple of times on stream, I screwed that up. And while it's unfortunate that I did fail, the experience was definitely educational, because I've realized that two mistakes I made were made early on. The first was not having the basic shape of the flute ready before I put any holes in it, and that I had used too narrow a drill bit, too small a drill bit in the center for it to really take a good tone. That said, that's still really thick there. That said, even towards the end, before the flute broke, and it broke under pressure from a chisel that I just purchased, which turned out to be less sharp than I thought. And speaking of things I have to purchase, there is a bench grinder on order for me so that I can do some tool sharpening, especially my chisels. Having a sharp chisel makes a lot of difference for a lot of woodwork. And while you can do a significant amount of chiseling with a hammer, it's really, really bad for the tool. The chisel, I mean, not the hammer. And if you're working with a particularly hard wood, the problem with using a hammer and chisel is that you can end up going both too deep on a cut and traumatizing the wood. Oh, there's a little bit of, I forget exactly what it's called, blue rot, I think. It isn't actually blue, it isn't actually rot, it's more of a fungus. But you can see a tiny bit of it there. There's a very pale blue just under this area of my thumb. What that is probably just a little bit of lingering moisture was in the wood. And it's a cyanobacteria that causes that. And it's not dangerous, and not it's not so much a fly in the wood as it is just a stain, essentially. And blue rot is not the right term for it. Blue something. Might be blue stain or blue mark. I can't exactly remember the technical term, but I've always referred to it as rot, even though it really isn't. That's partly because fishermen aren't the most educated woodworkers. Go figure. Okay. Okay, just about done. Then I'm going to sit down and take some chats while I have a cigarette. And I do apologize if my smoking triggers anyone else's addiction issues. I smoke because I have addiction issues, and decided a long time ago that one vice is better than half a dozen. Or rather, one uncontrolled vice is better than half a dozen disciplined ones. So at this point, I have a relatively disciplined addiction in cigarettes, and a very rigidly disciplined addiction to alcohol, because I was an alcoholic in my early 20s. Binge drinker. Not really a healthy lifestyle, and cost me quite a bit personally. Which is part of the reason I keep doing these things, because I want to pass on the benefit of hard-earned wisdom. There we go. So, the next... let me just put this away. There we are. So the next thing you guys will see me do, cut about another ½ inch or a centimeter up that way. And then I will be sanding this. Potentially I may strip it down to the heartwood. But in any event, I won't be doing that until the basic hole is drilled through the middle. I'm thinking that heartwood will be exceptionally attractive. And I'll lay that down there for now and have a seat and talk to you guys. Oh, hopefully there's someone still watching. I see there's at least one there. I'm willing to bet that's Billy still. Enjoy my Dr. Fate. Ooh. Oh, that was slightly off kilter. Hello, welcome to the Blair Witch. Come here, you. Okay. Some of the moisture off my forehead. Let's see what we got going on here. Top chat. Live chat. Okay. Oh, that didn't work. How did you quit the booze? Discipline. Very, very hard, rigid discipline. And I haven't technically quit. I've quit binge drinking. So I do occasionally drink. More like than not, my relatives didn't keep slaves. And if they did, it was far, far back. Juniper and gin, does it burn well? Any wood will burn. The sap is absolutely flammable. The British only recently finished paying the bill for manumission. That's true. I believe that was 2001 or 2004. White slaves were a thing too. Yeah, like I said, every single society on Earth has kept slaves at one point or another, and only the really reprehensible ones still do. What else is here? Sap is flammable. How did I quit the booze? There were a combination of factors. How bad were the binges? It got to the point that I was drinking a liter or more of hard liquor a night. And this would be 2 to 3 times a week. And part of the reason for that, and one of the things that was actually a saving grace for me, was that I never drank alone, which meant I was surrounding myself with people who would enable that binging. But also, when I decided to stop, I chose to avoid those people while they were binging, which made it very easy for me to stop binging. I see I've got a second viewer. Let me check for chats here real quick. Live chat. How bad were the binges? How did I quit? Yeah. The major thing I did was there's a series of things that need to happen, a variety of factors. I might as well take this thing off. I'm not going to need it anymore tonight. There were a variety of factors that led to me quitting. One was money. I simply didn't have the finances to keep doing it. Another was the fact that I attempted to, had to be careful with the wrath of Sooth in here. I attempted self-deletion a couple of times. I did have to get away from people who were binging because to change a habit, you had to find a way to avoid a habit. I'm fine now, but to be honest, in a way, it was one of the best things that happened to me. That's not to say that I encourage anyone to try it, but I was unaware at the time. You can't even see the scars anymore. That one you can kind of see, very light scar there. I had 36 of those all the way up my forearm from one of my knives. But because I wasn't aware of anatomy at the time, I didn't know that that wasn't going to do the job. I'll leave it there, since I don't want to encourage anyone to try anything, and some information is just too dangerous. But in my case, the biggest thing that I did was decide to make a change. And that's really the only way you can ever make a change. You have to have the will to make a change and the discipline to stick to that choice. And along the way, and this is one of the reasons why I talk so much about rewarding yourself or acknowledging your achievements, you have to keep in mind that every little bit of progress is progress. It may not happen as fast as you expected, but I think it was Confucius who said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. And there was a poet, I believe, who said, it does not matter how fast you go as long as you do not stop. It would be far easier, actually, to quit binge drinking than to quit constant drinking. If you are constantly drinking, your body gets to a point of immense dependence on that alcohol. Um, I wasn't addicted to the alcohol so much as the how is it Tom McDonald puts it? I was addicted to the feeling. Um, and yeah, Tom McDonald's song "Church" is basically part of my journey in a rap song, and I do actually recommend his music. He's awesome. Even the mostly I recommend the non-political stuff, but even the political stuff is really good. I gotta get this apron off. I'm starting to sweat through it. Oof. Yeah, doesn't take much to get really, really sweaty when you're a heavy dude like me. Okay, I gotta hang this thing up. Let it dry overnight. Ugh. I apologize if I just flashed some belly fat at you guys. But the only time I'll apologize for flashing anything. Okay. So, yeah, when you're a constant drinker, I am trying to lose weight. This is part of what I'm doing to do that. And I do actually have a pull up uh, device set up right there, which I'm sure looked interesting to the neighbors through the window when I was setting that up. The hook in the ceiling, and I apologize if I just blinded you with the glare off my dome. Holy crap, I am a pale son of a bitch. Wow. Talk about blowing the light balance. Let's see if we can get that angle a little better. There we go. Um, but when I was hanging that up, there's actually a hoist hook in the ceiling meant for lifting a motorcycle, for tire changes, things like that. Um, so it is more than capable of holding my 310, 280-ish pounds. I'm hovering somewhere around 300 at this point, which is exceptionally brutal. Explains why I have a bad knee, partly. Uh, I've also done some pretty brutal things to myself over the years. Ironically, none of them to impress girls. Yeah, 310. And I'm nowhere near the heaviest I've been. I was probably pushing 400 when I went to university, or sorry, when I went to college a couple of years ago. I went through a really bad period of depression a few years back and basically shut down for most of a year. Uh, it was basically do a little work, sit down at a video game, and eat. And it was just absolute garbage food that I was eating. Exercise costs $3 for an hour, and I am very much a poor. I would, if I still had a vehicle, I would be driving to. Well, there's a few different swimming holes nearby. They're not particularly large, but they would do for some movement. Uh, when I lived in Alberta, I was probably the healthiest I've ever been. The stationary cycle makes me insane. And because of my weight, I end up with not. There's a if you've ever seen the saddle on my of I don't know if you'd say die depending on how long you had been constantly drinking. Like if it's a case of decades, you very well be risking death to quit. But if it's anything less than a decade, typical cross trainer thing would be best. We'll let you exercise, lose weight, not bash your joints. Yeah, true. Stream's frozen. That figures. Let me know when you can see me doing the wax on thing. I can't keep doing this forever. Okay. Uh, assuming that my stream hasn't stayed frozen, which is probably an artifact of dog shit Newfoundland internet, um, I will be. Let me check my Wi-Fi is still good. Hopefully the stream has come back. If not, that's fine. I'm going to be ending here anyway. fairly quickly. Um, but with oh, it's back, wax on, wax off. Thank you. But with a lot of those devices, I find stationary bike, elliptical, because I'm standing in one spot and basically doing the hamster thing, it makes me absolutely insane. Part of the reason I'm doing streaming uh, out here doing woodwork is because that's a hell of a workout, as evidenced by the amount of sweat on my shirt and the fact that I'm extremely thirsty now. Plus, I don't drink enough water on a regular basis. So, water in, water out will actually help you lose um, water weight, because your body, when you starve it for anything, anytime you present it with that thing, it will try to hold on to as much of it as possible and use it as slowly as possible. Uh, but to go back to the alcohol thing, just to finish that off before I cut her off at around an hour and a half here. Um, if you're in a constant, if you have a constant level of alcohol in your bloodstream, what happens is your body chemistry shifts to both depend on it and deal with it. That's an option, yeah. Um, as I say, though, stationary devices, even when I'm trying to distract myself, it's very difficult for me to stay focused on what I'm doing, and I just want to stop. Um, and there's other things too. I mean, I really ought to be doing push ups or sit ups, or, well, not so much sit ups, but crunches. I should be doing calisthenic workouts. Um, but more than that, um, it can, yeah. What'll happen is you'll go through something called the DTs, detox. And with my past association with various uh, groups and individuals who have had substance abuse issues, I know that the DTs can be extremely terrifying. If you've ever seen the movie Trainspotting or the movie Basketball Diaries, both of which I recommend if you want to really see how bad drugs can be, um, or coming off of drugs can be. Either of those films will definitely give you a very good indicator of what kind of experience people have. The Basketball Diaries is one of Leonardo DiCaprio's earliest movies, and I cannot recommend it enough. Um, what else? Anyway, I'm about 20 seconds from an hour and a half here, so yeah, when you go through the DTs, one of the things that can kill you is are you talking about Rodney Dangerfield, the comedian? I know he was a drinker. Wasn't there a musician called Dangerfield not too long ago as well? Anyway, that answer comes in. That's where I'm going to shut this down. I'm an hour and a half, and it's what time is it? Just about o'clock at night. I need a shower, obviously. Um, but yeah, guy on YouTube. No, I've never heard of him. I guess from the way you phrased it, he's since passed away from being a junkie. Chris Dangerfield. No, definitely never heard of him. Um, anyway, yeah, I will be shutting this down here in just a second. So yeah, what happens is the DTs can be extremely terrifying to the point that you have a heart attack. Uh, Plus, then the body is essentially screaming for something that it suddenly stopped getting. Um, Quitting constant drinking cold turkey, while it can be the most effective. Oh, he survived. Okay, I'll have a look for him now when I go in then. Um, but yeah, constant drinking, it's just not healthy. Uh, and I mean, I had what, two beer back to back a few nights ago, and I was both drunk and knew I had reached my limit. And the next day I was relatively good, but I was definitely hungover. At this point, I can actually get hungover if I eat too much salt at night. The dehydration from just too much salt is bad. Uh, so, yeah, I didn't have any headache with my hangover, but I just felt generally low and miserable. Uh, and that's something I don't do that amount of drinking. Um, Maybe once in every couple of years. Uh, but I haven't been binge drinking. And if I had had a third beer, I would have binged, which is part of the reason I say I have a rigid discipline. Medical checkup, that's an option as well. Uh, Unfortunately, the medical system in Canada is not that great. Um, but yeah, I'm trying to work with my doctors as much as I can. I'm also trying to get back to the keto esque diet that I was on this time last year. Uh, I'm still avoiding sugar as much as I can. Still have a fair bit of chocolate, but there's only so much I can do at once. Um, Other than that, uh, yeah, I mean, doing this out here really puts me in a good headspace. It's good for cardio. It's mild for cardio, but then again, the size I am, mild cardio is a good way to start. To, to start. Um, Plus, I mean, it's anything that burns extra calories is going to be good for you when you're as heavy as I am. Uh, Plus, having thyroid disease, I've found that when I start to lose weight, it tends to be at an exponential curve. So I might lose 1 pound the first week, and this is very rough. The next week I might lose 3. The week after that I could lose 5, 10, 15. In the 4 months I spent in college the first semester, I went from being what I figure was about roughly 380 all the way down to about 280. I figure I lost around 100 pounds. I assume you didn't take the shots, so a little cardio shouldn't be a risk. Shots? I'm not sure what you mean by shots. Anyway, I'll check that message again just to make sure I'm getting the message clearly. Oh, the shots. I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, it's the thing that can't be talked about. No, I didn't. And uh, even so, there is heart disease and diabetes in my family, so I do. Yeah, I figured that was what you were talking about, Billy. I'm going to try to avoid talking about that on YouTube at the moment. Steven Crowder just got a ban, so I'm sure the knives are out for pretty much anybody who's not watching what they say. In any case, folks, hopefully anyone watching in the future, Billy, I definitely thank you for your support. It's great to have you here to have someone to talk to. Um, yeah, yeah, fair enough indeed. So I'm going to go have a look for Chris Dangerfield, and then I'm going to get in the shower. First, before I do that, I'm going to clean up in here. Actually, I may not. I may leave that overnight because of the smell that hits you in the nose when you come. Yeah, even though the CDC advice just changed, which was something I was going to mention on uh, stream this morning, and Bezic cut me off and basically said, no, 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 don't do that. I understand. And the advice has basically changed to anyone with the antibodies should be treated as if they had the antibodies anyway. Still got a little bit of that juniper bark in my mouth. It's actually quite tasty. Uh, but yeah, I think what I'll do, I'll just leave that mess on the table because I won't be out here very much smoking anymore tonight. So, and what I was doing didn't aerosolize any sawdust. So, anyway, folks, I'm going to cut this off here at 1:35:35, and wish you all a good night. Hope you continue to have good nights, and say rise and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye bye.